I was actually 49 years old when I first arrived in the Philippines to work for an NGO, and I really thought I was doing something meaningful and great with my life at that point in time. I'd been working in America for far too many years, and I was just really tired of the same old boring, typical routines. The same people, the same faces, the same boring conversations about nothing that could actually make my life better. When the opportunity came for me to work with an NGO in the Philippines, I jumped at the chance without even thinking twice about what I was going to be leaving behind. I remember feeling really excited on that first flight over, looking out of the window at the vast Pacific Ocean below, thinking about how I was finally doing something that would make a real difference in people's lives as well as my own. The NGO had set me up with a great apartment in Manila, and they'd given me a decent salary package that would go really far in the Philippines, or at least that's what everyone kept telling me would be the case. I spent the first few weeks there just getting used to everything, learning how the office there worked and meeting the local staff who would be helping me with the projects I would be doing. Everyone was really friendly, probably a lot more friendly than I was used to people being back at home, and they all seemed genuinely happy to have another American working with them. I was the fourth there. I was living in Makati at first, in a great serviced apartment that the NGO was paying for, and every single evening after work I'd walk around the area, trying the food at different restaurants, getting used to what it was like, and watching how people lived their lives there. It was all so different from what I knew back at home, but in a really good way. Kind of in a way that made me feel like I was actually living instead of just existing like I felt like I'd been doing for so many years before. About 3 months after I arrived in the Philippines, some of the other single American guys from work invited me out to P. Burgos Street on one Friday night. And I guess that's where everything really started if I have to pinpoint an actual time. I wasn't really the type of guy to go to bars like that, but I was still trying to fit in with the local expat crowd and the guys from the office who seemed to know about all the best places to go to. We went to this one bar just off the main P. Burgos Street that had a lot of girls working there, and they also had a few pool tables, and I was just standing there at the bar trying to order a beer when this girl came up and started talking to me. The other guys with me knew what the game was, but I was just drawn to her beauty and the way she seemed to be actually interested in me as a person, even though I was considerably older than her. We talked for probably an hour that first night. I found out she was 20 years old and that she'd actually been working in Manila for about a year. She told me she was from up north in Luzon province and that she'd come to Manila to find work and help support her family back home, which seemed to be the same story for so many young people that I met there. I bought her drinks, we played a few games of pool together, even though she was pretty terrible at it, and when the bar was closing, she asked if I wanted to leave together. I didn't know what to make of that, but I thought why not, and I guess that was really the beginning of it all, that single night on P. Burgos Street, even though at the time I just thought I was having a good time with a pretty girl. She seemed to be interested in me, getting to know me, and I was interested in getting to know her. I don't know what it was, but I started seeing her all the time after that first night, but I really wasn't expecting it to be the case when I first met her. After only a few weeks, it felt like we were basically together every single day when I wasn't working, and she'd come to my apartment in Makati after I got home from work, and from there we would go out, or we would do other things, whatever the mood took us. She was just so easy to be around and talk to, and time passed by so quickly when we were together. She was always asking me questions about where I was from in America, asking what it was like there and the different things I could do there, and what kind of life you could have. What my life was like before I went to the Philippines, all kinds of things she would ask. I spoke to her about the work I did with the NGO, all the projects that we were working on, and the way she seemed to be interested in it made me feel like she was a genuine person. While I spoke about work, she spoke about family, how she grew up really poor in the province, how she wasn't able to finish school because she had to take care of her family, and it really did seem to be such a different upbringing to my own. I did feel really bad for her. I wanted to be able to help her out, and because of that, I did start to give money to her every now and then. She never asked for money directly, but she always talked about how she needed things, or how she had problems with her family, and I offered to help because I thought it was the right thing to do. I felt good at the prospect of making her life easier. I'd say it was about 2 months after we started seeing each other when she moved full time into my apartment. It wasn't like we even spoke about it. She just started staying over every single night and she never left. The NGO had no care whatsoever about my personal life as long as I got all my work done, and having her there with me made my time in the Philippines feel a lot more complete somehow. More like I actually belonged there instead of being just another expert that might be there for work, but who planned to leave as soon as that work came to an end. That's not what I felt like anymore. This felt like it was something real and something that could see me staying in the Philippines forever. The next few years passed without incident, really. We were together and I thought we were building something great in terms of a life, and that made me happy that I was in the Philippines. I also managed to renew my contract with the NGO 2 times, each one for 2 years at a time, because I simply couldn't imagine leaving the Philippines without her. We moved out of that place in Makati and found a place not too far away that was bigger, and we spent time making it our own. While that first apartment in Makati was great, the second place really did feel more like a home. By this point, I was getting very used to eating Filipino food without complaining about it all the time. We went to travel around the Philippines together when I had time off, developing a few favourite places along the way, and I would start to dread the thought of having to leave the Philippines if that moment ever came. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be in the Philippines with her. She had a few friends who seemed to be dating foreign guys as well, and we would even go out together sometimes, though I always felt a little bit weird being the oldest person there. A few more years go by and I started to feel very comfortable with the person I was with. And because of that, I was teaching her things that I wanted to, about managing money, about saving for the future, about making plans that weren't just about living for the day we were in. I felt that she really seemed to appreciate everything that I was doing for her. At least that's what it felt like to me. And she went on to talk about how I changed her life completely, and that made me feel so good because I always felt like I was someone who was there to make other people's lives better. I guess that's why I took a job with the NGO. I even paid for her to go back to school to finish that, so that she could have a better prospect for the future just in case anything happened to be. But I must admit that she didn't really seem that motivated to actually better herself in that sense. But I was happy with her, and that's what counted to me. We fought sometimes just like every couple would, and it was actually about her family needing something over and above what I was agreeing to help them with already. But we always managed to work through those problems because that's just what relationships were like. At least that's what I thought. I guess I'd been in the Philippines for around 7 years when I first started seriously thinking about investing in a property there, since I was planning to stay long term, and I found that the property was a lot cheaper than it was in America, and it only felt right to put down some firm roots. A very unfortunate part of the Philippines is that, as a foreigner, I wasn't able to own land. But as someone from the Philippines, she could. So we started looking for lots together where we could build a house for us both to live in. We found a nice plot in a great part of Manila. It wasn't anywhere close to the centre, but it was quiet and peaceful and within my budget. Although any sort of commute I would do would be quite lengthy, I didn't mind. It cost me $30,000 for the lot. I felt like that seemed like a bargain because I was able to pay for it in cash, and of course I put everything in her name because that was the only legal way to actually do it. I can even remember hiring an architect to design the house for us. It was just going to be a basic 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house with a big kitchen and a covered garage. The construction took its time. There were delays with things that we needed to arrange, issues with the people doing the work for us, and I suppose just the usual issues that you hear about in the Philippines. I was putting money into it every single month, paying for the materials and the wages for the workers, dealing with all the unexpected costs that kept coming up. She was the one who was supposedly managing the construction when I was away at work, but I found out later that she wasn't really checking on things properly, just collecting the money I gave her for the payments and trusting that things were getting done as they should have been. By the time the house was actually finished and ready to move into, I guess I'd spent around $150,000 in total, which included the land, the construction, the furniture, and absolutely everything to make it livable. I felt amazing when we were able to move in, and I really thought it was a place where I was going to spend the rest of my life together with her. We weren't married, because I was technically still married in the US, and we both hadn't got round to filing for divorce. But other than that, I felt like we were just a normal couple living a great life in a great country, and now we had the chance to live in our own house. Beyond the house, I started putting money into other investments as well. These were always in her name, and I was thinking I was building something for our future together. We bought a small piece of commercial property up in her province, thinking we would be able to rent it out for a bit of extra income, though it mostly just sat empty most of the time because she couldn't find any reliable tenants. I funded a small sari-sari store for one of her aunts to run, putting in an investment of about $5,000, I believe, for inventory and improvements to the space, but that never really made any profit, and before long it had closed down for good. She wanted to try starting a small business herself, selling clothes and accessories in one of the big malls there, so I gave her $10,000 for that to get it started, from buying the inventory to renting the space, and also for her to hire a helper. That business lasted about 6 months in total before she lost interest in it, saying it was too much work and it was too complicated to have to deal with suppliers and customers all the time. Then there was the idea she had to buy a van and hire a driver to do deliveries for other companies, which I thought seemed like it could actually work, given how much things were changing in the Philippines at the time. I spent $25,000 on a brand new van and made sure to set everything up properly with all the right permits and insurance. And we hired a driver who was supposedly her cousin in need of a job. The van did actually make some money, for a while at least, maybe $1,000 a month profit. But then the driver disappeared with the van one day and we never saw either of them ever again. Each time one of these ventures that we did failed, she'd always have a reason or an excuse or someone else to blame, and she never pinned the blame on herself, and I just went along with it as I loved her, and I didn't want to believe she was incapable of success. Looking back on it all now, I can see I was just throwing money away really, but at the time each investment felt like a step towards a more secure future for both of us. One of the things that really shocks me is the amount of money I was spending on her family over the years. All of it combined probably added up more than everything else that I'd spent for everything, though admittedly I never really kept a close eye on it because it felt wrong to count every single peso when these people were supposedly part of my own family as well as hers. Someone always needed something. If it wasn't one thing, it was something else. Money for all kinds of things that you wouldn't even think of. And looking back again, I'm pretty certain that a lot of this money wasn't actually needed. It was just wanted, and I was expected to provide it, even though I wasn't getting anything in return, and it wasn't a life or death situation. I thought what I was doing was providing money for people who, if I didn't help, would be in a very bad way because of it. But when you find out that that money that you're giving to someone is going for them to buy, something that they don't need instead of putting food on the table and day-to-day living expenses, that really hurts because I felt I could have used that money instead of them. I could have vastly improved my own life with money such as that. I even paid for her youngest sister to go through nursing school, thinking that at least that was a good investment in someone's future. But it didn't feel like it was appreciated in the way I felt like it should have been, because I was really working as hard as I could. I had a few investments that gave me a bit of income as well, and I thought that by helping people like this I would be appreciated. But it's as if they just took everything for granted, not understanding how lucky they really were. Every Christmas as well, I was expected to give really generous gifts to everyone in the family. Every single birthday required a celebration that I would have to pay for. Every single fiesta in the province somehow became my responsibility to contribute to significantly. She would get upset if I questioned any of it at all, saying I didn't understand Filipino culture, that was the phrase she used the most, that family was everything, and that I was somehow being selfish with my money when I had so much of it supposedly, and they had so little. I know she was guilt-tripping me into helping out a lot more than I should have been doing, but I do feel like I was pushed into a corner, and I wasn't left with much choice, at least that's how it felt. I also didn't want to come across as being unkind, because I did love her, and wanted her family to have better lives as well. But the burden she was placing on me was too extreme, and I was struggling to handle it. The years are going by, I'm not unhappy. I think my relationship is real, but I am struggling with the things that were requested of me. But I'm going along with it because at the time I could afford it, and I don't think things could ever get worse. I'd say around this time I'd been in the Philippines for 15 years. 15 years was a long time and our life had settled down. I felt comfortable enough, even though it wasn't exactly what I'd imagined when I first arrived in the Philippines, or when I first got into the relationship with her. I was still working for NGOs, although at this time I started working for a different one, and I did become a valuable member of the team, so I felt like I'd always have a job in the Philippines if I needed one. My experience made me valuable, and I felt it because I did have good jobs. We spent most of our time at our house, but by this point I'd rented a small condo in BGC if I ever needed to be closer to the office, and we'd stay there, and it was good to have experiences in 2 different locations. She had her close circle of friends, and these at the time were mostly other girls like her with foreign guys like me, and they did all the usual things together, such as going to the salon, going shopping, and whatever else they liked to get up to. I had my own things that I did. After work, I'd hit the gym. I loved doing grocery shopping, don't ask me why. I loved buying things and trying to cook different things, and over the years, life just happened without much excitement, really. We started taking vacations once or twice a year after we'd been together for 5 years. We usually went to other places in Asia, such as Thailand or Vietnam, but I managed to get her a visa to go to America once because she wanted to see what it was like. We didn't stay there very long, but I felt proud to have been able to show her where I was from. The worst thing, though, was that our relationship changed from those early passionate days to something more akin to how roommates lived together. But I just thought that's what happens when you've been together with someone for a long time. She was already 35 by then. She wasn't the young girl that I met on P. Burgos Street anymore, and she'd occasionally mentioned wanting to have kids before it was too late, but I always managed to change the subject since I was already far too old for that, and couldn't imagine starting a family and having to go through all that. All the affection and excitement of the relationship completely went away, and it was like I was still fulfilling my obligations by helping her and her family, but she was just there. And again, if I look back, I would think, how would I have felt if she wasn't there anymore? I'd have been a damn sight better off, and I could have actually enjoyed myself. I'm not saying that we never enjoyed ourselves, but it was more like an obligation for her, just as it was an obligation for me to support her. Not exactly what I expected after being with someone for such a long time. The next 5 years passed by almost without me noticing that they were passing. It was just one day that seemed to blend into the next, 1 year blending into the next, and then suddenly I'd been in the Philippines for 20 years. I was approaching 70. I was officially retired from all the NGO work that I did, and I was living on my savings that I had left, which weren't anywhere near as much as they should have been given how much I'd spent over the years on her and her family. She was 40 now, and while I found her attractive still, I could see the years in her face clearly, and the weight that she gained, and the way she moved around more slowly and complained about having aches and pains. I knew that people got older, but seeing that in her was difficult to witness, because I still tried to be the person I was when we met in terms of helping her and her family. Yet, in return, she wasn't trying to be the person that I met. She wasn't even trying, even though I knew she couldn't actually be like that. She could have tried, but she didn't. When we spoke about things, it was never anything meaningful anymore, just boring day-to-day things, nothing exciting or new, and it was as if we were together, but we wouldn't have been, other than the fact that it was just normal. I tried to keep busy, trying not to think exactly how my life had turned out, because at this point I was starting to regret lots of the things that I did. One of the problems at the time, as time goes by, is modern technology, and she was always on her phone, texting people, looking at social media, watching those awful TV shows from different countries that shouldn't even exist. And sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with an expression on her face that I couldn't quite understand. As if she was somehow disappointed about how her life had turned out, even though I saw what she had as being a huge improvement from anything that her family had ever had, and I thought that should have been good enough. And still, even after all those years, her family wanted money regularly, though admittedly it was less than before since some of her siblings were working now, but there was always something. Some so-called emergency or opportunity that required my help, and I was getting quite bored of it. 20 years of being someone who gave his own money to make other people's lives better, without feeling even remotely appreciated because of it. I was tired all the time. It was all weighing heavily on me, and I was starting to slow down a bit, I think, in my old age. Looking back on everything, I guess there was probably signs that something wasn't quite right, but I don't know if it was because I didn't see them or because I didn't want to see them, or because I just didn't pick up on them at all. She was always going out with her friends, and that became more frequent as time went by, and she always made excuses about going to the mall or going to someone's birthday party. But she'd be gone for hours at a time, and the thing was, when I was at work, I didn't notice any of this. But now that I was retired, I started to notice this a lot more. When I used to work, she used to say that she was at home, and if she was going out, she said it was only for a short amount of time. But I never really knew what she was doing. I just trusted what she was saying. But now that I'm not working anymore, she's coming back after spending such a long time out of the house, and she's got shopping bags full of things that she's been spending money on. I tried to ask her what was going on, and she just got defensive straight away, saying that I was trying to control her, and that she deserved to have some fun after taking care of me in the house for all those years. That was a very painful thing to hear when she said that, because I thought I was the one taking care of her to give her the opportunity to have a house like that in the first place, because without me she wouldn't have had a house anywhere close to as good as the one we had. One day, she turned up with a brand new phone and was very protective of it. She always kept it face down and took it with her everywhere she went into different rooms. I guess in the early days we didn't have cell phones, and now things are becoming easy to spot, and I've got time on my hands to actually notice things, whereas before I was just too busy with work, and I don't know if I was completely oblivious to what was going on, or if I didn't care to actually think about it, but now I'm starting to have some bad feelings about things. There were so many things that I can't even count when she went to visit her family, and again she did what she did when I was working, but I was so consumed by my job that I didn't think anything of it. Sometimes money started disappearing from my wallet, and I don't know if I'm crazy for thinking that she's stealing it, because the thought of her doing that was awful considering we'd been together for such a long time. She always used to say I was getting old and it was because of my old age. She always made excuses as to why she was only able to do things her way and why she could never do the same as she did when we met. And I was still going along with this life and still giving money away when I shouldn't have been. Yet she's not doing anything remotely like a partner should be doing, and life is starting to get difficult. And what makes it worse is that I built my whole life in the Philippines. Everything that I had is there, even if most of it belongs to her, and the thought of doing anything else is really unnerving. It was actually a really stupid thing that made me seriously suspect that something was going on that shouldn't have been going on. It was just a simple receipt that fell out of her purse when she was looking for the keys for the house when we arrived back one day. It was from a restaurant in Makati, a really nice sort of place that would probably have cost around 3,000 pesos for 2 people. That's how much she spent. And it was dated from a day when she told me that she'd been at her sister's house helping out with her kids. When I asked her about it, she said that her sister had taken her there as a thank you for helping out, but that didn't add up. For a start, her sister wouldn't spend that kind of money on one meal for two people, considering she earned nowhere near enough for that to be the case. But mainly it was the way that she said it, like she couldn't quite look me in the eye, and I knew that she was lying. I knew her well enough by now to know that she was lying. It was because of that I started paying a lot closer attention than I did before, and now I was noticing little things that just didn't add up. Sometimes she'd smell like a man's cologne when she came home, and once I noticed she had some scratches on her back that she said were from a friend's cat, even though I knew none of her friends had a cat, and the excuses that she was giving were so bad that I was starting to question my own sanity. One day when she was out, I had to go through her things. I found a second phone hidden in one of the many shoeboxes that she had in the closet, but unfortunately it was locked, so I wasn't able to get in to see what was there. I found some jewellery that I hadn't bought for her, and it didn't look like it would have been something that she would have bought for herself, and the excuses for the jewellery were that her friend had given it to her because her friend didn't like it anymore, and she didn't want to throw it out. The more I looked into things, the more things just didn't make any sense whatsoever, and we were spending so much more money than we should have been given what our household expenses were, but she always had excuses for everything, and none of these excuses made sense at all. They really made no sense, and I was starting to really get upset because all I wanted to know was the truth. It got to the point when I finally decided that I just needed to know what the truth was, so I went as far as hiring a private investigator. This Filipino guy that I was introduced to by someone who was specialised in what was called matrimonial investigations, basically cheating spouses. He charged me $300 a week, which felt like a lot of money, but I thought it was worthwhile. While I was waiting for him to get to the bottom of things, I just remembered feeling so sick all the time because I dreaded what the truth was going to be. He followed her around for a full 7 days, taking photos and videos, and he documented everywhere she went and everyone she met. When he came to show me what he'd found, I could tell from his face that it wasn't going to be good news. He had a sympathetic look on his face, like he knew he was about to destroy my world. The first thing that he showed me was some photos he took with her and a Filipino guy. I'd guess he was probably in his early 40s, and he seemed to be well dressed and drove around in a nice car that I dreaded to think the money was from me to buy it, my hard-earned savings. I could tell by the pictures that they were close, holding hands as they walked through a mall, going into an apartment building together, and these were times when she told me she was seeing friends or getting her hair done. The investigator had even managed to find out more information about this guy, who he was, where he worked, where he lived, and that's when it got really bad. He lived in a small house about an hour from ours. It wasn't much of anything, but it was registered in her name. This was a house that she told me her cousin had bought, but needed to use her name for some complicated legal reasons that I hadn't really understood at the time. The investigator had also managed to find out some social media profiles that I hadn't even known she had. I could definitely tell it was her in the photos, and in these profiles she was posting pictures with this guy going back years and years. Vacations to places she told me she was going with her friends, or times she told me she was going to visit her family. Times when I was working really hard and just so consumed by work that I had no reason to doubt what she was doing. Everything seemed to point to the fact that they were in a serious long-term relationship, and I simply couldn't believe that this had been going on for so long, and I dreaded to think that this could actually have been on for as long as we were even together. The investigator really had done a good job, and over the next hour he showed me even more evidence that completely shattered everything that I thought I knew about my life for the past 25 years. This guy that she was with, they'd been together ever since we met. They were high school sweethearts from the same province, and from what the investigator could find, they'd actually never broken up. All those times she went to visit her family, supposedly she was actually going to see him, and I even think that her family knew about it all as well. Apparently, they were good with it because I was the one who was financing their lives, and thinking that I'd actually paid for the house that he was living in, thinking that I was helping her cousin, It just made me feel so sick to think how depraved some people can actually be. The van, if you can remember, for the business that I'd helped her to invest in, disappeared with the driver. How she had told me that we couldn't do anything about it because she didn't want her cousin to get into trouble. Well, it was actually registered in his name, and it was being used for his own business, and things just got worse and worse. The business that I invested in with her, that was for him to do, and what she was doing was just a front, and the money was actually used for something else, and it became clear that I was nothing more than her job. You can't really put it any other way. I was simply her job, and her boyfriend was prepared to accept it even if he knew exactly what it meant. The worst thing, though, which I knew nothing about, I had no clue, was that they had 2 kids together, a boy and a girl, and they had them before she met me, and they were already adults, and I won't assume that they knew what was going on, because that would be unfair to them. They had no real part to play in this because it was their parents that did this, so I don't want to put any blame onto them. But there were pictures of them all posing together on different social media accounts that I knew nothing about. And if I think about it, I think I'd seen pictures of them before, and she just said that they were her sister's kids. But really, they were her kids that she had with this guy. And over 25 years, she'd been living a double life. And I was the one funding all of it. I didn't know people could be so depraved. After I had found out everything that the investigator had told me, I didn't know what to do. I was destroyed. I just spent 3 days going back over everything in my head, trying to think about how I could have missed something like this. I wasn't able to eat, I wasn't able to sleep, and I started to think that I must have been the most stupid person ever for not picking up on any of it. When she came home from one of her supposed shopping trips without any care in the world, I had already printed out all the evidence and I'd spread it all over the table in the kitchen. The pictures, the documents, and everything that showed exactly what she'd been up to. When she walked in and saw all of it, for just a moment I actually saw a real panic in her eyes before she started crying. These weren't tears of remorse. She didn't feel bad about what she did. These were the tears of someone who had been caught and who was trying to figure out how to salvage the situation for her own selfish benefit. She knew she couldn't deny it because the evidence was irrefutable. I showed her all the records that I found from the investigator, all the pictures and the different social media accounts, her kids, and instead of trying to admit what a disgusting person she was, she started to get angry at me, saying that I was a stupid old man who thought that he could buy love, and I deserved everything I got because I was using her too. She said I wanted a young Filipina girlfriend to make myself feel important, whatever that meant, I don't know. Because when I met her, I wasn't even that old. I still hadn't turned 50 when I met her, so I don't really know what she was trying to prove. She told me that I knew what the deal was from the beginning, that nobody would actually love someone like me, that I was just pathetic for thinking it was real. But how could she say that? Because in the day-to-day she acted like it was real, and over the years, while there were little things going on, I didn't pick up on them because she was acting real. Then she started grabbing all her things, the jewellery, all the bags she'd got, her clothes, and she started packing them into a suitcase while calling someone on her phone, speaking in Tagalog. But I didn't know enough to understand that she actually calling him to get her. I just couldn't understand how she could do that without any care in the world. She left not long after, taking everything that she could carry with her, saying she'd be back for the rest soon, and I started trying to figure out exactly how much money I'd lost over the 25 years that we'd been together. I went through everything that I could get hold of. I didn't keep all my records, but the number that kept coming back to me was absolutely sickening. We were talking about a monumental sum of money, and when you think about it as one lump sum, it does make you feel sick to your core. The house, the businesses, all the money for her family, money for her sister, money for everything, all those supposed emergencies, the vacations that we took together and everything that I bought for her. If I actually think about it long and hard, I think the figure comes to somewhere close to $600,000. $600,000 was spent on her and her family over the years, maybe even more than that, and that money should have been for my retirement fund and for my security in my old age. It should have been my cushion for medical expenses as I got older, and now I'm in my mid-70s and I've got approximately $100,000 to my name, and I can barely cover my expenses on my social security. I had no assets because everything was in her name, and I did think about trying to fight it legally, but I was told by lawyers that I didn't really have a case because I'd freely given her the money and that the properties were legally hers and that we weren't actually married. That kind of thing actually happened all the time, they said, to foreigners who thought they were in love. The thought of losing $600,000 though, even if she really loved me, even if she never did something bad to me, even if she respected me throughout the whole time we were together, that was still too much money for me to have spent on her and her family, because they simply weren't worth that amount of money. But the fact that I lost that, while she was carrying on behind my back with her boyfriend that she was when I met her, and she was asking me to help her family, that was the thing that hurt the most, because I don't know how she could live with herself thinking that that was acceptable. It wasn't acceptable even remotely, and I still feel dirty and kind of like I've got a layer of grime on me that I somehow can't remove. I feel violated. I think that's the thing to say. I feel completely violated by what she did to me. After I found out everything that I found out, I started hating the fact that I was even in the Philippines. I'd been in the Philippines for 25 years. My whole time there I was with her, and now I didn't want to be there anymore. I spent another 2 months there after she left, just trying to figure out what to do, where I could go even, what could I do to salvage something from my life which had become completely wrecked by her. She even came back for her things just like she said. And to add insult to injury, she brought her boyfriend with her and they just loaded everything into the truck while I had to sit there watching. I was too defeated to even argue, but one thing that I did say to her boyfriend was it worth your girlfriend spending 25 years doing things with me? Expecting him to feel really flustered and embarrassed and angry, but he just looked at me, looked at the truck that he was piling stuff into and said, "Of course it was," and he laughed. That was when I knew that there was a special kind of depravity. But get this, when they were about to leave, she actually had the nerve to ask me for severance pay, saying that she'd been with me for a long time like a wife for 25 years, and she deserved something for her time. I just looked at her and laughed like, do you even understand what you're saying to me? What they didn't take, I managed to sell though. I managed to get back maybe $10,000 in total, and I packed up what was left of my belongings, and what I couldn't fit into the suitcase I just gave away. I just didn't want to be in the Philippines anymore, and I just didn't have the power to think about going somewhere else other than home to America. And that was the longest flight of my life. Just thinking about all those stupid decisions that I'd made. But mostly just thinking about how she had managed to trick me for such a long time. My excuse for myself is that I was working hard for most of that time, and therefore when I was at work, I just trusted that she wasn't doing anything like that. Because why would you think that somebody would do something like that? I found myself a cheap apartment. I even got a part-time job at a local store just to supplement my social security. And I started trying to rebuild some kind of life, even though I knew it would be never the same again. I was simply too old to start again. But I was also too tired, and I couldn't even be bothered to think about the possibility of anything better. My life was like my life was, and that's how it would have to be. I spent 25 years in the Philippines, and I don't recognize my town anymore. All the places that I used to go to are either closed down or boarded up, and I get on with my life the best I can. I lived a life of 25 years. I thought I was building a life with someone who I loved dearly and who I thought loved me too. And sometimes I even talk to people, guys my age, talking about how they hope to retire to the Philippines or Thailand, and I have to warn them about it, tell them what could happen, but nobody listens. I guess just like I wouldn't have listened if someone had tried to warn me. I wonder how my life would have turned out if I'd never gone to the Philippines and I'd never gotten that job working for an NGO in the first place. I guess it would have turned out a lot better than it actually has.